Let me ask you a wide open question just to start us off here in this second section of the afternoon. Did anything come up or was anything handled in such a way that you were in any respect surprised by what was said, by what we did with what was said, procedure, anything that was surprising in the first hour?
The book mentions that idea of 25, but it's always surprising for me to hear, these probably because I'm starting to learn the skills, but 25 seems pretty low, like you said, maybe somebody that has done this for years and years.
You learn to trust that, but you also learn how important it is that you're dealing with basically a homogeneous population.
Yeah.
And we illustrated that pretty well, I think, this afternoon.
Yeah.
You notice that variability begins to knock off, so that you're not getting that many more new factors.
That was very helpful. I mean, to actually see that.
And if we'd have kept the thing down to a single sex, it would have been even clearer. But you could easily see if we'd gone on, by the time we got to 50 cases, men and women, we'd be pretty close to the bottom of the barrel.
Likewise, I found that very encouraging. As I'm thinking about developing a research plan, I'm looking at this population that's not open, I don't have no immediate access to, but I think I could get to 25.
The problem is you would really need to get to a randomly drawn 25. And that's, see, if you notice we talked samples on the first sheet. If you look down about halfway down, 60% down the page in section 5. Got it on the first sheet? See, drawing a sample, compare convenience sample, random sample, and representative sample. Now we talked about two of those. The one we didn't talk about is the one that hardly needs to be dignified, because what is a convenience sample?
Take what you can get.
That's take what you can get, because I can only get at these 5 guys. These guys are my sample. That's a convenience sample, and there are times when you frankly simply say, I'm taking a convenience sample. Not necessarily the end of the world, it's just not the most valid way to do it. And we are concerned about validity, right? Why are we concerned about validity?
Truth.
We're concerned about truth. Right? And science in general is. So this means that's a Christian characteristic. All good science is concerned about validity.
Or it seems like validity in a more generalizable way. Because you may be true with the sample that you do have, but the question is how far can you expand?
How far can we generalize? Now, so far, what I've attempted to show you is how you can take basic, common sense logic. I did it with the first thing you brought up. I played with the issue of validity. I did not deal with that in terms of technical argument. The only secret knowledge that I brought in one factor of what you might call learned knowledge, or the secret lore. What was that piece?
25.
That was the 25. And I brought that in deliberately to show you, yeah, that's important, but it's also easy to see logically where that has come from. And then I walked it through. Because the way I teach research is exactly what happened in that first hour. I want you to understand it logically and reasonably, not as a bunch of terminology to be memorized in terms of this means this means this means this. Sure, we've got to name the animals so that we don't talk about that big creature out there stomping on the radishes. It's an elephant. Yeah, we got to be able to talk. And we got to mean the same thing by words. But that's not what it's all about. Ultimately, research design is a matter of logic and reasonableness. And that would be true no matter what topic we brought up. And I want you to grasp things in terms of the logic of the ideas. And those of you who are going to be teaching this, I want you to see the value of teaching it as a logical matter, not as a bunch of secret truth. You're not, learning a secret lore that you can pass on to some select high priests. This is reasonable logic. There's virtually nothing we do in research because it is required. We do it because it is valuable to do it that way. and you understand the value of it, then you got it in your understanding. All right? Okay, any other questions or comments? From time to time, I will stop, pause, and give you a chance to bring up whatever is troubling you or noticing that we haven't dealt with that. What I'd like you to do now is go over page 3 of this worksheet. I don't intend to go over this page by page. And if you've got any sections in here you want to ask about, feel free. But I'm not going to walk you through it. But I do want to walk through the schedule just a wee bit. On October 6th, Tuesday, that's today, session 1, Rationale and Principles for Empirical Research, 3 purposes, 5 rating tasks in research reporting, researchable questions, quantitative and qualitative approaches to inquiry, and defining a research problem in empirical terms. That's a big order. And we've just barely started it, so we've got a lot to do here in the next hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is. Is there any one of those questions or topics that anybody here could already name, answer, or illustrate? Look in session 1, all that stuff over on the right. Pick something and tell us about it.
By 3 purposes, do you mean description, explanation, evaluation?
Not quite. Close.
Is that
Don't walk off too fast. Don't give me a sense. You're so close. You're so close.
Interpretation is one, to interpret.
No. No. You could argue that that's a correct answer, but the point here is talking about the 3 purposes. You remember I illustrate this mass of stuff called research methodologies and procedures with 3 examples that are kind of like 3 spots across a large taxonomy, but they're illustrative of the rest of the taxonomy. I give you, as a technique for organizing this course, I give you a taxonomy of purposiveness. How many different kinds of research are there in social science? Qualitative and quantitative. We could say the same thing in science, in hard science, and we say the same thing in biology. What are those? Qualitative and quantitative. What is that taxonomy? It's a taxonomy of dual or 2 functions. What are those 2 things? How have you divided it? In other words, what is the difference between qualitative and quantitative? What is that axis? If you were to say, well, we could divide it into 5 or 6 or 7, we could name brown and green and yellow and orange and red. That's a taxonomy of color. Thank you very much. All right. Or we can say no, it's vegetables and potatoes. That's a taxonomy of vegetables. What is quantitative and qualitative? Taxonomy of what? Based on what?
Is it statistics and ethnography?
That's parallel words, but doesn't tell us what the taxonomy is based on.
Well, one is to discover and one is to confirm.
You use the term descriptive and experimental.
That's out of my taxonomy, which is not based on the same axis as the qualitative quantitative. I'm trying to get rid of the quantitative qualitative first, because that's even mentioned here. Quantitative and qualitative approaches. And that's a taxonomy of approach. You approach your evidence in terms of a quantity or a quality. Now, if I asked you, let me just visualize this and we'll actually do it. I'm going to ask any 2 of you stand up. All right, I've got 2 people standing. Compare those 2 people. Compare them. Okay, 2 people in here are standing. Compare them. What are you going to say? Say something. He's taller than that one. All right, that's what kind of an approach is that? Quantitative. You're looking at centimeters of height. You're looking at measurement. Now I have 2 charming ladies of our group stand up, and the men suddenly say, aha, what you've done there is to give us a very difficult task. Which one is prettier? Now, what is that? That's an approach we would call a qualitative approach. It's not a measurement, you see. It's a description, it's a judgment. Now, that's the approach. How you go at. Okay, so when this one says qualitative and qualitative approaches to inquiry, that's exactly the distinction we're making. Which one of those approaches uses counting or measuring as its basic activity? Would you believe quantitative? That one's easy. Which one uses description in terms of words describing qualitative? Is that easy? There you got it. You'll find these words commonly used. Are they synonymous with anything else? Yeah, but not perfectly synonymous. What is quantitative usually in terms of methodologies? What species of methodologies do we generally use to do qualitative research? Did I say it wrong? Did I say quantitative?
first.
Yeah. Okay, that's good enough. Stick with it. What species of methodologies do we use?
Testing instruments and testing.
The answer is measurement. The answer is measurement. The answer is measurement. Now, if I'm comparing IQ of high school graduates in Denmark and Sweden, what kind of study is that going to require? Quantitative. What kind of methodology is it going to require? Measurement. Now, at this point, it's no big deal, right? IQ test or some other kind of measurement, right? All right, let's look at qualitative a minute. A lot of people trip up on this because qualitative doesn't translate as neatly. See, quantitative translates really neatly. Quantity, numbers, measurement, statistics, all that's easy. Qualitative is not quite so easy. What kinds of data do I need for a qualitative research? What kinds of data do I need? I will use ethnographic methodology because ethnographic methodology deals with this kind of data. What is the kind of data? Descriptions of one of two kinds of events. In ethnography, what are the two main events that we deal with? Observations, that's one of them. Interviews, that's the other one. Now, out of an observation, what do you get?
Data.
Themes?
Pattern.
You're okay, but keep going to the bottom of it. What is that stuff? Words. Words. Statements. Descriptions. Right. So then, ethnographic methodology dealing with observation is going to deal with descriptions, pictures. All right, now I do an interview. What is the data going to be after I come away from that interview? What are we going to have? Thank you very much. Words again. Words. Now, is there a difference between words and numbers? Can you analyze numbers? Can you analyze words? Do you analyze words the same way you analyze numbers?
No.
To analyze numbers, you use a technical skill called statistics. To analyze words, you use a technical skill called, now watch it. Does anybody know? Two words we're after here. What is the technique you use to analyze words or verbal descriptions? Two words.
Data analysis.
That's close. But data analysis is also statistics.
Interpretive analysis?
Huh?
Interpretation?
That's part of what you do. But the two words are what?
Content analysis.
Content analysis. Thank you very much. Sometimes also called verbal analysis, or literally analysis of the words. Content analysis, that's the right answer. Now if I asked you a question like this, in the realm of ethnography, there are two kinds of analyses that are used above all else. What are these two kinds of analyses in the realm of ethnography? The answer is going to be verbal analysis of, that's why you've got to go on with it, of interviews, or verbal analysis of descriptions of observation. Both verbal analysis. Does that make sense? But a verbal analysis of an interview is not done the same way as a verbal analysis of a description of an observation. That's only logical, isn't it? Have I said anything terribly illogical? Any of it sound like magic potions yet? Now then, let me come back to the three purposes that I use as the taxonomy of types of research methodologies. In order to make it most simple, the taxonomy is what's called parsimonious. Do you understand the word parsimony?
Yeah.
Parsimony or parsimonious means what? P-A-R-S-I-M-O-N-Y. Parsimony.
Cheap.
Lean.
Lean, can't be reduced anymore. That's the technical word for it. The technical definition of parsimony. Can't be reduced anymore. Think of it this way. What's the minimum number of chairs that a leg or minimum number of, minimum number of legs that a chair or stool must have in order to be self-standing?
3.
So legs and parsimony and chair gives you what number? 3. This is my parsimonious taxonomy of research methodology. And it is a parsimony around not procedure or method, but around purpose. There are basically three purposes that we put social science to. Now what you see there is three purposes, right? It says right on the top line, three purposes. Somebody tell me what those three purposes are.
Description.
Describe.
Put the word TO ahead of each one of them, make it a gerund. To run, to skip,
describe.
and to play.
To describe.
To describe. To describe. Numero uno. Number one. To describe. There is no more basic research than research that describes. Now, why must you describe before you do anything else? Again, we're back to Adam and the animals, aren't we? You've got to be able to describe this environment you're working in and what's going on there in order to be able to do anything like build a hypothesis, for example. And in fact, this is one of the things that really galls me, is the number of people that will, even in student exercises, create hypotheses about things they really don't understand. They haven't even looked at descriptively. And all of a sudden they start hypothesizing. Hypothesizing is not part of the descriptive process. It is what happens after the descriptive process. What is the purpose of describing? Scientifically, what is the purpose of describing? You might take some notes on this one because it's very important. You'll use it up and down and sideways as you develop proposals. What's the purpose of describing?
Understand.
To distinguish.
Very surely it's to understand. It's to understand to that extent of being able to describe the interrelationship of the components and how they relate to one another. Now, I'm going to look at the river, and I'm going to give you a beautiful description of the river. This is a beautiful river with a nice sunset, and it just looks so great. We've got these cute little boats floating around on it, and the river seems to be gently moving down to the sea. And I can see in the background, I can see the sea, and I can see all this interesting, here's a kind of a cliff over here, and here's a kind of a beach or sandbar over in this direction. Oh, can you visualize it? Now, that's a poetic or photographic description. It's not a very scientific description. The scientific description is going to be able to relate those parts, and I mentioned several things quickly in there that probably, from a scientific point of view, need to be explained in terms of how they interact, if you're really going to do a scientific description of that scene. Now, what did I mention that you would be able to relate? Were you listening? I flipped it past you real fast, but it's there in your mind's eye. Did I not mention the river moving toward the sea? Did I not mention cliffs? Did I not mention sandbars? How does the river relate to the cliff? How does the river relate to the sandbar? How does the river relate to the sea? You got it? Now, what's the purpose of all those questions? What do they allow us to do if I deal with those questions?
Make predictions.
You're right, but you're jumping too far down the road.
But understand relationships.
Okay, to understand the relationships among those components that are evident in that scene. Hence, description, and the purpose of description is being able to describe the interrelationships of the components to such an extent that we are then able to now bring forward your genius there. Predict or hypothesize the interrelationships in such a way that we can experiment with them. Ah, see, there is a connection between the descriptive and the experimental. What is the purpose of an experiment?
To discover.
Yes, but the whole scientific process could be argued, it's all interrelated parts of the discovery process. This one probably is most central to it, but what about cause and effect? You're right, it's on the trail.
The impact of variables?
The purpose of an experiment. The purpose of an experiment is to
Correlation.
To prove your hypothesis.
prove a hypothesis. Oh, so close.
Test it.
Establish.
So what is it? What?
Test.
To test the hypothesis. What's wrong with saying to prove a hypothesis?
Don't prove it.
All right. The whole point is truth, not propaganda. See, if I'm allowing myself even in one moment to say my purpose is to prove this hypothesis, it sounds as if I may be fairly biased. I have to be very cautious about that, and certainly in terms of how I say what I'm saying. I don't want people to get the impression that I already know the answer. Unfortunately, many people who go into science at this stage in life are still blighted by something that happened in the 7th or the 8th grade of school. In the 7th or the 8th year of school, worldwide, many students encounter science in the form of demonstrations conducted usually by teachers, so that all the children can watch this yellow stuff being poured into this brown stuff and the whole thing foaming over and turning green, which demonstrates whatever it is the teacher is arguing at that time. You ever been through a science experiment like that? And that's called an experiment. Now today we're going to do an experiment, children, and what happens is that the teacher will take you through some mystery box activities that you only about half understand. And then because the teachers generally are distracted because children are hard to handle, something goes wrong in the experiment or in the demonstration. And at some point, what's supposed to turn green turns orange. And the teacher, what does the teacher say then? Well, if we had done it right, it would have turned green. Do you ever encounter that in 7th grade science? And what does the child learn in all that process? That an experiment is when the teacher does mystery box stuff and tells you what's supposed to come out. And that's one reason why a lot of people just can't get serious about doing good dissertations. Because they're so accustomed to mystery boxes and telling what's supposed to happen. An experiment is when you test a hypothesis. Got it? Question: where does the hypothesis come from?
Description.
Thank you very much. The hypothesis, if it is worthwhile, is the outcome of a previous research, which was probably a, what type? Descriptive research. Probably, in effect, having been done in a quantitative way. Now all of a sudden you say, aha, this taxonomy says that there really is a connection between purpose 1 and purpose 2. So when it says here, 3 purposes, the first 2 of these are intimately connected. Purpose 1, to describe. To describe so thoroughly that you can hypothesize. Hypothesis testing, then, is the purpose of the second type of research. What do we call that type? If the first type is description, the second type is experimentation. Now, the problem with this taxonomy is that it doesn't flow nicely into the third as if these 3 were interconnected. They're not. The third one is disconnected. It uses the methodologies of the other 2, but it does so for a particularly pragmatic purpose, and purpose that is not inherently scientific. It is a scientific methodology employed for the purpose of executive decision making. Now, what is executive decision making? Give us a quick definition of that. Anybody? Come on, nobody's had their head eaten off today for speaking up. What is an executive decision?
Decision made about policy.
Decision made about policy by,
Say your shit.
somebody says the boss, the bureaucrats, the decision makers.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
What's the deal? What do you call that kind of research that informs executive decision making, makes executive decision making more able to be wise if it wants to be? Evaluative. Got it? Now, evaluative research is not in that scientific chain. So don't say, I see there's 3 things here, each one depends on the other. The first one is descriptive research, and then that allows you to do, and then that allows you to do, whoop, don't say that. Those 2 are the scientific system. The third one is the applications of that scientific methodology to deal with questions about should and ought and can. Should we do that? That's what an executive decision is all about. Executive decisions, should we close that plant? Should we increase that work line? Should we change the vice president? That's an executive decision. Does that sound very scientific? No. Now, if the person who's making those decisions wants help, he gets help by hiring somebody to do some evaluation. The evaluation then feeds the executive decision maker a better basis than he otherwise would have on which to make that decision. If he uses it. If he uses it. What do you suppose you're apt to do when you are, many of you put your hands up earlier and you said, somewhere in my career I'm apt to do some research. Which of those 3 types are you most likely to be asked to do most commonly? You don't even give me a chance to name them. Jump to the right answer right off the bat. The answer is evaluative. The fact is that most of us will be asked to do evaluative research more commonly than anything in the scientific chain. What's my point? If I teach a course to a bunch of educators and a bunch of missionaries and a bunch of people who are going to be called upon to help out in research, and we do it purely as a scientific thing and deal only with the first two, I'm going to shortchange you. Because what you're apt to be asked to do is to deal with that third. Now, here's the nice thing. If you really know how to do the first two, you have the basic methodologies and the logic that you need to set up the third. Because the third one is a pragmatic application of the safeguards and proofs and texts and truths, again back to validity, from the first two. Does that make sense? So would you say then that evaluative research is scientific research? Now that's a very tough question. It's not a bad question, but it's a tough question because it has an ambiguous answer. Scientific research, or no, pardon me, evaluative research is scientific research. And the answer is yes, but only in one sense. Let me come at it real easily. Descriptive research is scientific research. True or false?
True.
Experimental research is scientific research. True or false?
True.
Evaluative research is scientific research. True or false? It's not a bad question, so you can't get out that easily. It's true in the sense that, you've got to add that. It's true in the sense that you do it by
Using basic techniques.
scientific methodology. It is true in the sense that you use scientific methodology. The Chevrolet automobile is a scientific car. I didn't even say Mercedes, I said Chevrolet. The Chevrolet is a scientific car. True or false?
True.
Somebody says true. What brave soul said that? All right, admit it. Who did it? Who did it?
I admit it.
All right, why did you say that?
I said it because it is the application, the pragmatic working out of scientific research.
Exactly. See, there's a parallel there to how you look at the question of evaluative research. It's a pragmatic working out of that which science has already discovered. You're not going to use scientific. You're not going to use the Chevrolet as a scientific research tool. Probably not even going to use the Mercedes that way. But it is a product of that same scientific process. Are you getting it? Now, those three types of research then are taxonomized according to what? Purpose. Purpose of descriptive research? To so clearly describe phenomenology that you can generate hypotheses. Purpose of experimental research? Test hypotheses. Purpose of evaluative research? We haven't named this one yet. You've got to come up with some words. Purpose of evaluative research? Somebody say it clearly. Say anything clearly.
To implement.
To implement, close.
To apply.
To apply, close. Let me give you a little clue. To inform. To inform. Now, what follows that? Decision making. Decision making, or executive decisions. Okay, let's tick off another one of these. Let's look at the very first one, rationale and principles for empirical research. First of all, somebody tell us what is empirical research. Empirical research. If you know your Greek, that'll help. Your biblical Greek will help you here. What is empirical research? Research based on observable is the magic word. Thank you very much, Rachel. Observable phenomena. Now, when we say observable phenomena, what do we mean observable? What other words could we fit in there? measurable, describable, okay? Things that can be discerned by the senses is what we mean by empirical. How many senses do you have? In the Western world, we have 5. In Asia, we have 7. Gee, I
Chinese
didn't-
would say 7
Seven.
七情六欲.
Is it really 7 senses?
Yeah. According to Chinese.
Better research.
Now, let me tell you the 5 that we know about in the West. Okay. Seeing,
Like
hearing,
tasting,
tasting,
smelling,
smelling,
touching.
touching. 5. All right, now, brother, tell me about the other 2 senses.
I don't know. I have to check out.
Actually, I think that's pretty universal. I've never I've never run into 7 in a scientific sense. We get into the sensing in other ways, but if you talk about the empirical senses, you're talking about that which not only can we discern with the machinery that the good Lord gave us in creation, but any 2 of us can agree. Now, don't get cute here. Dear brother, how many we got there?
2.
2, yeah. One of them is laying down. What's the other one doing?
Standing up.
And we agree. Okay, that's the great value of empirical work. We can view it, see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, and agree. It's empirical. Now, if I ask, what are those good for?
Writing on the board.
Writing on the board. Yeah. Can you see that going on?
No.
What else is it good for?
You can write on paper too.
Write on paper too, huh? I can throw it at one of those guys over there that's making right?
You could just
Yeah. Now what realm are we in? Just non-empirical. It's non-empirical. We are simply speculating. Are we doing good science now? No. We could do this. Say, question, could this be used to write on the table? Be my guest.
I guess you could.
Answer,
Yes.
yes. Now we're in science again. See, it's not just his opinion that it can be used for that, but it's the empirical evidence that it works for that. Got it? So science is in the realm of the empirical. Now, are there some questions in life that are important but are not empirical? Here's the rub. Science is inherently limited to the empirical realm. Certain categories of questions cannot be dealt with in the empirical realm, and I tell you this now for several reasons. First of all, you need to know it. Secondly, you need to remember it when you start getting research questions together. What kind of research questions do we not want to see in here or anywhere else?
Could you use that?
The kind of research question that deals with the non-empirical. Now, one of the key valuable questions in life is, what should I do with my life? Is that an empirical or non-empirical question? Non-empirical. Social science research will not answer it. So when we're in the realm of should or ought, valuable as that is, we are not in the realm of social science. So whatever else you come away from this session number 1 in here with, come away with the consciousness that nobody suggests that science answers all the questions. And in fact, many of the most important questions in life are not going to be dealt with by science. Don't try. And don't assume that you're going to make a good dissertation out of a question or a series of questions that are non-empirical. For example, I'm a member of a group here in South Zanzibar, and we are wanting to know how to evangelize these 10 villages. We want to research on how to evangelize these 10 villages. Does that sound like a promising piece of dissertation research? It is awful. It will result in nothing but frustration. Now, if someone says there are 5 methodologies that we could use for these 10 villages, what characteristics of these villages would predict more or less success with these 10 methodologies? Now are we moving toward the empirical? Getting closer. See, we built some criteria. Now we're asking the question, what characteristics fit with what kinds of criteria? But when it's a matter of judgment call, you cannot turn a judgment call into a piece of scientific research.
My reading about qualitative research and quantitative analysis leaves me feeling like we're going outside of the empirical areas sometimes.
Much of that thinking gets dangerously close to groundless speculation. Now, there are attempts, because everybody's pushing the threshold, as it were, pushing the window. There are some interesting things happening as people are trying to stretch in those directions. And I'm not going to go into it in great detail here because this is a foundational course. But yes, your point is well taken, and that's where the frontiers are at. But still, we have to, the big barrier there is still the empiricism problem. Okay. All right, now, what principles would pertain in empirical research? Just create a few principles. Come on, this is logic, reasoning. Give me a principle.
Careful data collection.
Careful, precise, well-defined data collection is going to be necessary in any empirical research. Exactly. Give me another one. He's not getting that off the standard list, I can tell you. Coming up with applications of logic. Give me another one. Let's go.
Objectivity.
All right, objectivity. Say something about it.
So many people agree with one thing, one principle, not just one people, but many people.
Okay. So whatever it is we treat as evidence or data should be drawn objectively enough that it is not a unique vision or a unique interpretation. If I'm the only person that sees this, it's not apt to be a good piece of data for an empirical research. You're dead right. Exactly.
It must be reliable.
We haven't mentioned reliable yet, have we? We need reliable data, not spurious or unpredictable data. Now, let me give you an illustration of reliability. I am sitting under a tree. The tree has some apples in it. And I'm sitting under this tree for 5 minutes. At the end of my 5 minutes, a single apple drops and it goes boink. Aha! There is a piece of evidence. I have, in 5 minutes' time, I have 1 apple on the ground. Now that's a 5-minute observation that has spotted 1 dropping apple. Therefore, I presume that in 1 hour, I would have how many apples? 12. Now, do you detect a problem of reliability? What is it?
Not all the apples will fall after 5 minutes.
See, I don't have any basis of arguing that that 1 5-minute period is a reliable picture of other 5-minute periods. Yes, 1 apple fell in that 5-minute period, but what's going to happen in the next 5-minute period? It's not a reliable model for my quantitative analysis. So reliability is going to be important. Let me tell you what this question ought to be also dealing with in your heads. Empirical research is going to have to be guided. It's going to have to be guided, directed, managed. It's going to have to be responsible to a guidance system that is precise. Now, an empirical research is going to be either empirical research is going to be either a quantitative study or a qualitative study. All right. If I guide a quantitative study, quantitative study, what guidance mechanism must I have? And this is not new information, it's something we've been talking about, but I'm using it in a different way. It's the same something, but it's the guidance system for a quantitative study. What is it called? No, wait a minute. That's a tool. Guidance system. It tells us what we are looking at and what we're not looking at.
No.
Quantitative study. What is it that says that's what we got to look at? Tool.
Population.
No.
Patterns?
No. Go ahead and pop a few out here. Think. Go ahead and.
That's the question again, please.
What is it that guides a quantitative study?
Hypothesis.
Thank you. You really did your homework.
Jeff, I just didn't talk about enough about 5 minutes ago.
The hypothesis or hypotheses literally guide the study. You don't gather other data that don't relate to the hypothesis. You don't look at other things that don't relate to the hypothesis. I mean, that defines the study, doesn't it? We're trying to test if this relates to that in a certain way, right? What else do you need to look at? That's it. So then the guidance mechanism of a quantitative study is hypothesis. Thank you very much. In the same way, and we haven't mentioned this one by name, but it's so simple you may be able to intuit it. If you just pop up enough answers, somebody will pop up the right one. The qualitative study, similarly, is guided. But what is it guided by? Right. Who said that? Questions. Now, these questions are not just questions off the wall. They are called what? Research questions, or in the jargon of the field, they are called RQs. Guess what RQ stands for?
Research and development.
Thanks a lot. RQ, research question. Okay, the research questions then are analogous. Here's a good quiz question for you. The research questions in a qualitative study are analogous to what in a quantitative study? Yay, verily. See the logic of that? In the first level study, the descriptive study, what guides it is research questions. Now, in the case of you're building a research in this mode, which you will be doing starting right now, where do you get those research questions?
Descriptive research.
No, wait a minute. Whoop, we haven't done descriptive research
They
yet.
could emerge from what you're observing.
Let's assume, though, that we want to have some guidance as to what we're going to observe. Where do you get the questions that guide the descriptive study? Now, truly, that's a good answer. In a sophisticated way, you mold those questions out of your exposure experiences with the phenomenon. But your general starting place for a descriptive study is your handling of the research problem in terms of any previous experience, relevant theory, and particularly previous writings that shed light on this phenomenon. So where do you get the RQs usually? Literature. Literature. Does that make sense? Now that's why when we say to you, you've got to know the literature of that field. You can't get your research questions until you know the literature. That's one reason why it says in here 2 or 3 different ways, 2 or 3 different times, that you've got to have a literature base. You've got to know the literature of something well enough to be able to know what the research questions are that make sense. Are you following me? Now we've suddenly connected the realm of learning about, in terms of reading and previous research that you're examining and so forth, learning about the phenomenology and setting up a descriptive research to deal with it further in a particular case or application that you're concerned with. Many people doing research presume that there's somewhere a magic rule that says you cannot do any research that's already been done. That is sometimes called silly, other times it's called stupid. And I prefer to call it a kind of a silly, stupid idea. There's hardly anything worth doing that hasn't been done already before, one way or another. And to pretend that you're going to search around until you find something that somebody else hasn't done is almost like saying, what I'm going to do is waste my life. Because the odds are very good, if nobody's ever done that before, it's probably not worth doing. You never want to think of starting a research simply because nobody else has ever done it before. Is anything that anybody experienced in research just loathes hearing? There's somebody coming to him and said, I'm really interested in this because I can't find any literature about it. I don't think this has ever been done before. Yeah. What makes you think it should be done? That's exactly the key question. This is also known derisively as the Sahara effect. The Sahara effect in research. Now, the Sahara effect goes a little like this. It's always so much more enlightening to stand in the middle of the desert with no footprints anywhere and stand and scream into the wind, nobody's ever been here before. Nobody's ever been here before. Yeah, nobody's ever been here before, and for good reason. And after a period of time, the wind will blow over your tracks, and nobody will believe you've ever been there before either. No, you do research where there are other things going on, and where there are precedents for what you intend to push forward. So therefore, your research is always the next step in a chain, the next link, you see, in a chain. Your reviewing of literature is a matter of showing where the chain is. And then you say, and this is the link that I'm going to develop next. And you stand on the foundations of the previous research. Does that make sense? It may be a little more humble than this rather sophomoric notion that you're going to do something nobody ever has done before. Most of those things have already been done, and the ones that haven't aren't going to be done by beginners. So just get off it and don't think of it that way. That's a principle. Where do you start your empirical research? Either with a hypothesis or with a question. Where do you get your hypothesis? Previous descriptive research. Where do you get your questions? Research of others' previous footprints in that track. Where do you find those footprints? In the literature. You got it? We got the whole thing chained together now. That's the research chain. Does that make sense? Now, if we want to report a piece of research, we generally use 5 pieces to report it. Now, this is about as close as we're going to get to magic cards. Okay, I'm going to deal you the 5 golden magic cards now. And each one of them has a name on it. But you're going to discover that these 5 golden magic cards are logical. If I'm making a report on something, what is the first place I'm going to deal with? What's the first thing I'm going to deal with? I've done a research. I've got to report it. The report is called, if it's at the master's level, it's generally called a if it's at the doctoral level, it's generally called a dissertation. And the first section is going to deal, no matter who does it, no matter where, the standard style is typically 5 pieces. Because there are 5 bodies of stuff that need to be dealt with. Now, in some studies, we may need 2 of these and 2 of these, which would give us a total of 7 chapters. If I need 2 of these, it'll give us 6 chapters. But it literally is 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got it? But I don't number it 2A, 2B, or 2, 2. I number it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So a dissertation won't have necessarily 5 chapters or 5 numbers, but there are 5 functions. And the functions are what we're talking about now. So here, 5 writing tasks in research reporting. A dissertation is a research report. All right? And so is a journal article based on the research. It's still a research report. Generally, there are 5 pieces. First of all, you tell the reader what? What was the problem you were dealing with? What is a good heading for section 1?
Purpose?
The research problem. And one of the reasons I like problem better than purpose is that research is too easily, especially in the hands of beginners, mixed up with purposive activity like proving something or showing something or answering something. Therefore, we have a purpose. Our purpose is to convince the world that Ipana is better toothpaste than Colgate. We've got a purpose. And we have a target audience. And all the rest of that directed stuff that is just verboten in good science. Okay? Forget the word target. Forget the word purpose in terms of that kind of thing. Think in terms of the inquiry purpose. Research is to inquire. All right, then our first chapter, or our first section of a proposal is going to be called Research Problem. Now, a problem is not a question. Let me tell you a problem. That wall right over there, and I've been watching it, is tipping about 1.5 inches more than it was earlier this afternoon, and the whole thing is coming in this direction. Now, that's what I call a problem. Would you agree? Sitting where you are, and you have an opinion? It's a problem. Now, a problem is a statement about what it is that is concerning you. Now, you might have a section that even precedes that or follows it called research concern. That's nice to have. And that can also be in section 1. And you can talk about the fact that you don't particularly relish the idea of being smashed by a falling wall. That's your concern, right? So you have a concern. Notice that your research problem is essentially an unemotional one. The wall is beginning to fall, tipping in your direction. Which is more emotional, your problem or your concern? Come on, wake up. Which is more emotional, your problem or your concern? Your concern, of course. All right, so your research problem is basically a cold scientific description of what's going on. Now then, you have some research questions that follow after that. At what rate is this wall tipping? How many degrees off plumb is it become? Is there anything going to restrain it? How far out will it fall when it falls? How many people are under it? Those are good research questions. Now, what is the characteristic then of a research question?
Describe the facets of the problem.
They're going to, very good. The collective of questions will indicate what the facets of the problem really are. All right, very good. What else is true? Research questions. They're going to be answerable empirically. Answerable empirically. I ask questions like, how many degrees off plumb? How far out has it come? How fast is it moving? How many people are under it? Are those empirical questions? You betcha. Make sure your RQs are empirical questions. Now, so far, what kind of a study are we building here? Experimental or descriptive? With reference to this wall, it's a descriptive study at this point. We haven't hypothesized anything yet. We don't know enough to hypothesize. What would you hypothesize? We hypothesize if we all get up here and push, we can straighten it out again. Come on, we don't know anything about the weight, we don't know anything about how fast it's moving. What will happen is we all get over here and push and get smushed. Pretty dumb. Got it? What's the second writing task? We described the problem, we've dealt with the concern, we've described it as a problem, we've described the questions that go with it. That's section 1. And by the way, we'll put some other little decorations in there. We'll put our definitions of terms in there. And we'll also put an overview of the study. What else are we going to do and how are we going to do it to answer these questions? You just have an outline right there for section 1, folks. And there's no magic outline that you have to follow that everybody else always follows. It's just you have to deal with those kinds of things. We'll talk about this again. What's the second section? Isn't that a logical second? No. What do we know about falling walls? What's been written about falling walls? You know, there was the Jericho incident, and there's a lot of other stuff like that. What do we know from the literature? Now, what's the Bible say? There must be some relationship between this wall and trumpets. What's the literature say about falling walls? Why would you want to talk about the literature, for heaven's sake? Think about it. Why would I put that in second? It's because I'm not an idiot. What's that got to do with it? Well, an idiot would leave out the second chapter. Why? He doesn't care what we already know about it. He's going to find out for himself. Now that's called idiotic behavior. We really want to know what is already known about this, don't we? Now I would agree that it may be a little idiotic for all of us to troop off to the library while we wait for this wall to fall, you know, to read all the books and get it all straight. Yeah, but there's where the illustration breaks down. We need the literature. And the literature, what does it need to focus on? The topic in our problem. Beautiful answer. Beautiful answer to the problem. This is not a time to talk about architecture in general. This is not a time to talk about, you know, great buildings I have known in North America. It's not a good time to, you know, comparative literature on library walls in Thailand and Illinois. No, stick with it. Focus the problem. All right, now what do we do in third section? And again, if we're reporting what we've done in our research, what are we going to put in here? The procedures we use, the methods, what did we do to get at it? Well, here's what we did. We're going to propose. In our proposal, we put it in the future tense. And by the way, that's why I call sections, this is peculiar to me, and you don't have to follow it, but it's always been a helpful thing for me and for many people I've taught this. When you write a proposal, call the parts sections. When you write the dissertation or the final, call it chapters. That way, if you pick up a piece of draft that says section 2, you know you're looking at a proposal. If it says chapter 2, you know you're looking at a dissertation or a report. It helps to keep things neat. Section 3. What do we put in the proposal, section 3? Methodology, procedure. How are we going to go at it? And it's a future tense matter. Future tense. How are we planning to do this? What will we look at? What will we look at next? And particularly, what sample out of what population? Describe the population. Describe the procedure by which you will get the sample. By the way, headings. You need a lot of headings within your chapters. What's wrong with a heading in chapter 3 that says population and sample? That's a subheading for 3. Does that sound okay to you? I don't like it. You don't like it? Good. Then you and I are friends. That's all it takes to get on my friendship list. Why don't you like it?
It's two different things.
You betcha. Population is the description of this set of creatures, or this set of circumstances, or this set of mission organizations. What are they like as a population? So the emphasis in population is an emphasis on describing that bunch of people or organizations. Now, sample or sampling, which even helps you keep it straighter, what is the emphasis there? Is it description? Specification of procedure for drawing out the sample. We will put all the names of these people in a hat and we will ask a cute little girl no older than 7 years old draw out one slip. Now, is that a population description? What I just said? No way. Is it a sampling statement? Yes. Now, in the sampling statement, you've got to tell us how many you're going for, what kind of representation you're valuing, and exactly how you intend to do it. We need to put some other stuff in section 3. What's that going to be about?
What are you going to do with the sample?
What are you going to do with the sample? What are we going to ask them? What are we going to look for? What are we going to observe? What are we going to do as an inquiry? And again, this is where the magic word inquiry. Inquiry procedure. A wonderful heading. Inquiry procedure. Subheading. What else might we put in 3?
How are you going to get your data?
That's going to be your inquiry procedure. But if there's anything else involved, yeah, good. That's what I was looking for. What are the instruments I'm going to use, or the actual instrumentation procedures that will guide my observation? My observation guide, my interview procedure, the so-called protocol for an interview. Do you know the word protocol? Protocol. 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 Protocol literally is a technical word. Here's another one of those little golden jewels. There is a logic for why it's used, but it's a peculiar thing. Protocol literally means the guidance schedule for an observation, or an interview. Because an interview, well conducted, is not the same thing as a questionnaire. You understand a questionnaire? That's an instrument. Questionnaire is a list of questions that somebody can answer in writing. A protocol is a guidance for an interview. What's the principal difference between a protocol then and the questionnaire? Protocol is going to name topics. And it may not give all the detailed questions. It's going to say, deal with this matter and these sub-matters. Then the interviewer invents ways to bring that up and deal with it.